Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa with ITS Communications, and today we are going to be talking about OneDrive and OneDrive Sync with Josh Gural, who is our O365 Product Manager and who knows everything Microsoft, as I'm sure a lot of you know based on our past sessions. Before we begin, I just wanted to let everyone know I am recording today's session, so if you have anything you want to refer to later, or you want to share this with colleagues who unfortunately couldn't attend today, you can absolutely share this with them. I will send it to you in a follow-up email. And because we are expecting quite a few people to log in today, I have muted everyone's microphones just to prevent any unintended background noise. But please feel free at any time to post any questions in the chat. And if you'd like to come off the mic to ask a question, just hit the raise hand button under the React icon in your Zoom toolbar. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that tomorrow is actually the 10-year anniversary of Tech Tuesday. We have seen almost 15,000 attendees in this past decade. So I just wanted to thank all of you so much for attending these sessions and supporting them. I see a lot of familiar names all the time in these sessions, and we're always happy to see new names and faces as well. So just wanted to say a quick thank you, and hopefully you'll attend many more in the future. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Josh.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to try to speed through the slides as much as I can to keep demo and questions the priority of this. But thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for hosting Tech Tuesday, Vanessa. I think that's great that tomorrow's the 10-year anniversary. Glad to be a part of it. So today we're going to talk about Microsoft OneDrive and specifically within OneDrive, the OneDrive Sync tool. So how can you interact with your files without necessarily having to go to the web browser all the time to interact with said files. So we're going to keep this PowerPoint agenda relatively short and sweet. And please, again, like always, when I give these sessions, post questions and chats. If you want to come off mute, I'm sure we could probably accommodate that. Ask any sort of questions that you guys have, because that's where the value of these sessions, I think, really are. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to give a recap of what we've talked about previously in regards to this, and we're going to expand on it specifically with the OneDrive tool in mind. We're going to specifically talk about OneDrive Sync because I think that's going to be the most helpful tool for the vast majority of you guys here on the call today. We'll give a little bit of an overview of the web and UI user back up web and Teams OneDrive UI, because I think some people will interact that way, but most of the time I think you'll want to interact with the OneDrive Sync tool, and then we'll open it up for closing remarks and QA. But this guy over here in this Copilot image that I created, which I think was pretty perfect, is kind of the problem we're trying to solve, right? So if you're anything like me, files get put everywhere, right? There's some in OneDrive, there's some in the file server, there's some in Box, there's some everywhere, right? Um, Perhaps in my somewhat biased opinion, I think OneDrive is a great tool to centralize all of your files. We have the security in place for any sort of sensitive files. Sharing is there. And if it grows to a larger initiative, you can pivot over to things like Teams or SharePoint, right? So I think OneDrive is a great tool to potentially replace your use of the file server. You can use it off the VPN, which I think is great. I very rarely go onto the VPN. And it's secure, which I think is obviously great, and also very user friendly once you set it up correctly, which hopefully we will have you all set by the end of today. So recap. I'm not going to play this because, as my boss, who I think's on the call, jokingly said, it would be really funny to just play an old Tech Tuesday and a new Tech Tuesday. But I linked this one here because there's pieces of this that is applicable here, right? So what I don't want to have happen in this talk today is to think that OneDrive is a replacement for what I talked about in this session. If you didn't watch the session, please do so. I embedded it here in the slides that Vanessa will send afterwards, with also the URL there. That is a very important presentation as you're getting started with these things. So keep this in mind. OneDrive is not meant for sharing wide to a dozen people or more in some cases. And this kind of dives into when those cases may be true, when those cases are not true, and what to do if you have sharing with your entire team. So please watch that if you haven't already. But a couple of pieces of that. we will touch on today. So in summary, OneDrive, which is what we're talking about today, is for your own personal file storage and light sharing, right? So if you have a document, a draft you're working on, like me and Vanessa working on this presentation, for instance, it's fine to just share a OneDrive link because it's going to be a presentation that's given here today, and then we kind of move on, right? What it's not meant for is group collaboration, long-term files, things like that. That is shared with the community. That is something more apt for Microsoft Teams or SharePoint. Luckily, the OneDrive sync tool actually works for SharePoint and Teams. So everything we'll talk about today is applicable for that, and you can easily move files back and forth if the need arises. So specifically, and this slide is pulled directly from that old presentation, when to use OneDrive is for, again, personal file storage, file sharing with individuals, right? Like I mentioned, a couple of people can be inside or outside the organization. Syncing, that third bullet, is going to be the main part of today's talk. And then again, like I mentioned, drafts, right? So working on something that eventually is going to be moved into a larger interactive long-term storage. Any questions so far before we talk about syncing? I don't see any in the chat, so I'll just give it 1 second, and if not, we'll keep going. Okay. So, syncing is the point of today, right? So, a lot of people, myself included to some degree, need the full version of PowerPoint or Excel or Word, whatever the case may be, to interact with files that you use on a daily basis. Some people just flat out don't like the web experience, right? I use the web experience mostly, just because I preach that you should, so I should do what I say, right? But there's some cases where you just need the full version of PowerPoint, like I'm in here now, or the full version of Excel or Word, etc. So the sync tool makes that a seamless experience, right? If you want to interact with the web to just quickly reference a file, you can do that. If you want to have that full file on your desktop, Windows or Mac, you can do that as well. And it basically looks like you're connected to the file server, right? It's a little bit of a different icon on the left-hand side, noted by those magnifying glasses, depending on if you're Windows or Mac. But once you're there, you can see the files look like it is your file share, right? That you already have access to today. So I think this is a great way to kind of have the best of both worlds, right? You have the flexibility of the online environment with the local handiness of the sync tool. A benefit of this too is it's all multi-edit, right? So if you have it open in the browser and then you open it locally, it just works, right? It'll sync across when you're on Wi-Fi. You can save things for offline access, which we'll talk about in a second. I think it's a great tool to have, just so you can have your files no matter where you are. Doesn't matter where you're interacting with them. You can edit them in any platform. These are actual links here. So if you click on Windows or Mac, it's a good way to get started. We're going to touch on how to do it here in the session today. But if you want more information, you can click on your OS and go from there. While I'm on this screen, I asked Vanessa to specifically remind me to say this, so I'll say it now. If you are on Mac, be sure if you're going to do the backup feature, which we'll talk about here in the next couple slides, you aren't backing up with other technologies, right? So I know iCloud does something similar to this. I know Box does something similar to this. Make sure that you're only using one sync backup at a time. And we'll talk about that in 1 second. So OneDrive Sync Tool, you might have noticed on this previous slide, there's these status icons here. That is a very important icon and a question I get asked all the time. So here's the summary of what those icons mean. We have the blue cloud icon, looks like this. We have the green circle with a white check, looks like this. And we have kind of the inverse of that, right? So we have a white circle with a green check. All of these mean different things, and it's very important to understand what the differences are so you don't get stuck in a point where you don't have access to a file you want. The blue cloud icon means that that is just a link locally, right? So for instance, this desktop documents pictures here, right? These are all the blue cloud icons. That is just a link to your files. If you have no internet access, if you are on a plane, if your power goes out, whatever the case may be, you will not have access to these files locally, even though it looks like you do. It's just a link. It's actually a great benefit, right? Because if you don't interact with all of your files all the time, you won't blow out your hard drive space locally, right? Files that you don't necessarily need immediate access to, you just want to have around for, long-term storage reasons. Most of the time you're on Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter. If you double click on a Blue Cloud link when you're on Wi-Fi, it'll just download real quick and open. It's pretty instantaneous. Um, but if you want files to always be on your device, that is this next icon here, right? So it's the green circle with a white check mark. Files that you mark always keep on this device. And we'll show this in the demo, but any of these folders or files, either way, if you right click on it, you can say always keep on this device. That is denoted by this icon here. And no matter what happens, that file has a local copy on your hard drive. So it does take up hard drive space. It'll always be there. When you're on Wi-Fi, it'll automatically be updated when updates do occur. If it's shared, somebody else makes an edit, even you make an edit in a different platform, whatever the case may be. But when you're outside of uh, Wi-Fi, for instance, those files will still be available. Great for presentations if you're going to a location you're not sure of the Wi-Fi. Great for if you're on a plane, you want to do some work, you can mark a couple of files as always keep on this device. So when you're on the plane, open up your laptop, those files will be available no matter what happens. Um, Similarly, but different and vitally different, there's these green tick icons, as they call it, which is the white circle with a green check. These are temporarily available, right? So if you would double click on a blue cloud icon, it turns to this icon. And that means that it did pull down a copy of that file for you to edit, but you should not have any uh, assurance that that's always going to be on your device, right? When the cache clears on your system, that file can go back to cloud only. So that's okay to leave files in that status, especially if files you're actively working on. But if you want them always to be on your hard drive, make sure you right click on it and say always keep on this device, and you get this icon here. This is a big part of the presentation here today. These are vastly different, and I see people get confused, especially on these two, because the UI is kind of silly how they just inverse the colors. I wish it was something different, but very important. Also very important from an icon perspective, you might have two icons in your desktop. One is personal and one is business, right? So the blue one, as you can see here, is work or school. The white one is personal. So if you have a personal device that you have personal OneDrive on, all of that stuff will be here. The blue one is for work or school. And then finally, a chain icon is a link. So you can actually link over other OneDrive folders from other people, Teams folders or SharePoint folders into your OneDrive. That's the little link icon here. So keep in mind that that is truly a link. You may own it in a different location, like if you're the owner of a team, but it is not necessarily in your OneDrive. It's just a link to a different location. Any questions on any of that before we jump into demo?
There is a question, but it looks like Raphael answered it in the chat. Basically, someone was asking, I thought OneDrive was SharePoint in the enterprise setting, and Raphael's clarifying that OneDrive and SharePoint are part of the same backend cloud system, and SharePoint's better suited for work group related sharing, and OneDrive is for personal data.
Absolutely, yes. So the presentation that I linked at the very beginning, I think, starts out with that kind of funny slide that everything is kind of the same, right? Um, let's see. Can I find it quickly? Yeah, so this slide here in that presentation talks about how they're all the same, right? Um, SharePoint is what powers OneDrive and is what powers Teams, but they are for different use cases, right? So for that question, I would recommend watching this presentation because it goes into much more detail about that. But yes, technically they all are the same platform.
We have a question from Veronica, although this may be answered by your demo, Josh, that's coming up. How do we change file status from local to online?
That's a great question and a great segue into the demonstration. Yeah, so let's open up OneDrive here. I have mine already set up. You can see I have a number of files here. If I right click on any of them, you'll notice that there's a couple of quick actions here on the Mac side, one of which is always keep on this device. The alternative to always keep on this device is free up space. So to answer that question, Veronica, anything that you have already done always keep on this device, you can click free up space and it'll put it back to the blue cloud icon. That's a great question. Mac OS 2 icons, same colors. Yeah, for Thomas's question, we have seen that in a couple of cases, depending on what's going on. There could be a number of different things, so you could reach out individually and we can take a look. Good call, Raf. Um, Very similar to those. For Joseph's question here, I'm not sure, Veronica, if you could see my chat window open here, or not, so I'm kind of repeating the question. If Box and OneDrive seems very similar, both supported by WCM. Which one is recommended? I don't know of any official we're getting rid of one or the other, so I'm not saying that. However, I do know that OneDrive is preferred for more sensitive files, right? So we do have agreements with Microsoft that we don't with Box. So if especially if you're interacting with PII, PHI, things like that, definitely OneDrive would be the platform of choice. I also think that it's easier to integrate with the other systems that we have, right? So we have Teams and SharePoint, and like I mentioned, to kind of life cycle of a file type things, OneDrive is a better technical solution in my opinion. But Box is you're right, similar and does very similar things to what we do and or what we'll be seeing here today. Um, I'm not sure I understand the question from Maria, so maybe if you can explain that one a little bit more. Why does the file save under personal as well as the selected folder? Not sure I understand that one. So maybe just a little more detail on that. While we're getting some more questions here, I want to bring up a couple of other items for demonstration. So if you're not even familiar how to get to OneDrive, a good place to start is just portal.office.com. It'll take you to kind of the home page of everything Microsoft, right? And if you click on this little waffle menu, as they call it, you can find OneDrive here. I already have it open. And when I open this up, one area of confusion is they did introduce this home screen first. I have a love-hate relationship with this. At first, I really didn't like it, but I'm growing to really like it after I use it more and more because it does show you things you've touched recently, which is great. But if you're looking for more a file structure type platform, clicking on My Files will be the solution of choice there. When you go through My Files, it'll look just like kind of like a file server, right? You can scroll through different folders and files, etc. One thing I wanted to highlight is, for instance, this presentation is stored on my desktop for easy access. If I right click on this, version history is a question I get asked a bunch, right? So if you are like me and get annoyed with Tech Tuesday OneDrive dash final for real dash final with Vanessa's edits, things like that. You have multiple files for the same thing. That is a thing of the past with OneDrive, right? So if you right click and say version history, you'll see I have 9 versions of this presentation that I worked on over time. So you can actually right click and restore any of these at any time. And I'm not going to do that at the moment, but it would make it version 10, right? So I'd still have all of these past versions. I just have all of them up to 500, which is crazy per file, right? So if you have a version that you're like, you know what, I did some edits, I don't really like the way it turned out, I could right click on, perhaps version 5, and I can restore that file if I like. Also keep in mind, I guess, that you can delete versions. So if, you or somebody else puts information that maybe shouldn't be in there, you can right click on this and say delete version to make sure that that is truly gone for good. Good in cases of like sensitive information actually accidentally gets pasted and it saves or something like that. It's always a handy trick to have, especially with autosave. Keep in mind that exists. But the version history is a thing that I think is super helpful. It gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that if I go in here and totally mess up this presentation, I can always go back to a version that I know was better. So that whole final version is a thing of the past. Um, Once you're in OneDrive, and this could be Mac or PC, right? So either home, whatever, doesn't matter where you are. If you click on this little gear icon on the upper right, you'll see sync this OneDrive, right? You might have to get the OneDrive apps if you don't already have it. If you're on PC, you probably already have it. If you're on Mac, I bet you already have it too, if you have the normal Office suite, but that's there if you need it. But if you click sync this OneDrive and follow the prompts, I already did it, obviously. It's very straightforward. you'll get this OneDrive location here on the Mac and all of your stuff syncing over. So that document that we just looked at, my presentation is here. I can right click and have all the same access that I talked about earlier, always keep on this device, etc. On the PC side of things, everything is similar, right? So hit the gear, hit sync this OneDrive. If I open up my file explorer this time, here's all the statuses I was talking about, right? We have this one, which just means, I don't think we talked about it yet, but it means it's doing something, right? So it's syncing currently. It's spoiler alert because I have the presentation open, right? So it's not saved yet. But you'll see some of the white circle with the green check. Maybe I want this one here to be always keep on this device. It'll sync for a minute and you can see it changed to that green circle with a white check. That means that this file will always be here no matter what now. If I go offline, I'll still have access to it. I can do that for folders or files. So if I wanted to do it for this whole file, I could, or whole folder rather, I could. Be careful with this because if you do that for a whole file, remember it is indeed going to put all of that information locally on your hard drive. So make sure you have space in your hard drive for that to happen before you do that, right? Okay. Couple of other things I wanted to talk about, and this is again on Mac or PC. You'll notice the blue cloud icon here on PC or on my Mac. It's up here at the top. If I click on this, and I hit the gear, well, first of all, I guess before I do that, you'll be able to see the kind of overall status of your OneDrive, right? So I see a question here that says, I have it synced, but it never gets updated past January. I would make sure that this is actually synced. Make sure that this is in good standing. If it's not, it'll be a red X and it'll say there's some sort of issue. Could be an authentication issue, could be other, things. You can reach out directly to me if you have more troubleshooting to do. But this is a good place to start, right? To just see the overall status of your files, right? So I can see that all my files are indeed synced. If I hit the gear, I can get into some settings. I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. One is the backup that I talked about, right? So I do this on my PC here, and on my Mac is a little different. I'll get to that in a second. But you can back up your desktop documents and pictures, right? Which is, I think, super handy. Anything I create in any of those locations automatically gets backed up to OneDrive. Keep in mind, it does move the path, right? So it will actually move your documents to a different location under this OneDrive Wildcard Medicine. So if you have any applications that are referencing the file path, be careful when you do this because you might have to change that. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind if you ever turn this off, your files will not be automatically moved back, but you can indeed move them back if you want to. So it's not gone forever. Don't panic. But this is a great way, I think, to keep all of your files automatically backed up. If my, PC ever, breaks for whatever reason, it's lost, stolen, whatever, all of my files are backed up here. And again, pretty good for peace of mind reasons, right? And that is Mac or PC. But again, remember in my presentation, the highlight on your Macs specifically, PC is true too, but I know Mac on the iCloud side, you can't necessarily do iCloud Drive and OneDrive at the same time. It gets confused of where you're actually backing things up, right? So if you're doing things like iCloud backup, you may want to consider not doing that if you're going to go forward with OneDrive backup. So only do one or the other. Same goes for Box or Dropbox or whatever the case may be. It's best to only do one backup solution. Okay. Account is a great place to highlight too, because you'll see a bunch of information here for other areas you're syncing. So I talked about this in my other presentation. So if you want more information, please reference that. But you can actually sync Teams folders as well, or SharePoint folders as well locally, same exact way. You'll bring it up here on uh, your File Explorer or your Finder in Mac. This account section shows you all the ones that you're syncing to, right? So if you want to remove one because you're done with that project or whatever the case may be, the account section here is a great way to see everything you're syncing, and you'll be able to unsync some items as well. Further, for the OneDrive side specifically, which is our talking point of today's session, you can choose which folders you want to sync. So especially of those who've been around for a long time and have rather large OneDrives, you might not even want the link for some of these, right? So you can go in here and uncheck items that you don't care about. The grayed out ones are just because I have backup turned on, so obviously I can't turn that off because I'm backing it up. But I can uncheck some of these and say, I don't want any of these to be syncing because I don't care. And then I hit OK, and it will exclude those from the sync. Notifications, pretty basic here, nothing really to call out there, with the little exception of if you click on this blue cloud, hit the gear, you can also pause syncing, which I think is pretty helpful, especially if you're in an area of uh, subpar internet, right? So if you're in like a Starbucks or something and your computer's really bogging down network wise, you can pause syncing really quick here. Keep in mind you are pausing syncing, so you won't get the latest updates. But it is nice to have this quick setting here if you're trying to do a presentation and things are lagging. Um, this doesn't usually take very much bandwidth, so I don't know if you'll have a ton of success by doing this, but you can absolutely pause for, one of these uh, durations here that are pre-chosen if you'd like, just to give you some more bandwidth. Okay. Um, One last thing I wanted to mention as well before we open it up to kind of some general Q&A, or if you guys wanted to see anything specific, is when you're in the web version of OneDrive, again, you can go to My Files. You can interact with this here. This will sync once you have the sync turned on, right? Um, you can interact with this in Teams as well. So Teams has a OneDrive app directly in Teams. So rather than having to open up the OneDrive files here, and maybe you don't want to necessarily sync to your desktop, which is totally fine. You'll be able to interact with it on Teams. So you just in your sidebar here, you can have it pinned. If you don't see it there, click on the three dots. You'll see it in this list of applications, and you can right click and pin anyone you like. So you could pin OneDrive and note that it looks pretty much identical to the website, right? So you could go to My Files, you could go to this presentation here, and I can open this presentation up directly here in Teams as well. Okay. I'm going to do a scroll of the questions. Looks like Raf has been having my back on a lot of them. So does anybody have any specific questions or want to see anything specific of what we talked about here today? I wanted to leave a good 15 minutes for Q&A, which I think we're about at time for.
While we're waiting for questions to come in, I do see that a lot of people, or not a lot, but a couple people have had some issues with syncing or have questions about specific use cases that they haven't been able to figure out. In the follow-up email, I will be copying Raphael, who manages a lot of our infrastructure apps, and Josh on that email. So please feel free if you do have a question, even if you forget to ask one now and it comes up later, please feel free to just reply to that email and we can get you the help that you need. It looks like some questions are coming in right now, Josh.
Yes. So just starting with, it looks like Raf actually took this one, but the cloud does not come up long enough for me to click on. Yep, he's right. It's probably hidden in here. So if you click on this show hidden icons, I bet you it'll be hidden in here somewhere for you to click on. So that should be good for that one. If that's not the case, that application might be failing. So you might need to submit a ticket for a reinstall or something like that. I've seen that in the past too, if there's a weird version collision or something like that. Julie, what a file was shared with me on Teams? Where do I find it on OneDrive? That is a good question, and it really depends on what you mean by shared in Teams. So if somebody's sharing a file with you, like in chat or something like that, I can see all of the files that people have shared with me under shared in their individual chat, but that actually is using OneDrive right in the background. So you'll be able to go to OneDrive and hit the shared button here. By default, this does not sync to your uh, desktop documents, whatever your sync tool that we just talked about, right? But you can do a link for any of those, right? So if you wanted to, you could, copy a link to any of these and paste it in there if you like. Um, so that is for that. Can OneDrive sync with Google Drive? That is probably not the greatest of ideas. I would like more information on what you're trying to actually do there. I wouldn't do that, is my short answer to that. For a number of reasons. One, security. Two, you don't want to sync with two cloud platforms, like I mentioned, just because it gets a little messy. The states of the files can get corrupted more easily and things like that. So I would pick one and roll with it. And between the two of those, I would definitely pick OneDrive. Um, can you review the sharing functions? Yes, that's actually something I wanted to touch on, so I'm glad you brought that up. So in OneDrive, you can do this in the sync tool as well, but I'm going to do it in the browser here just because I'm here. You can share files and folders, like I mentioned. Again, keep in mind, it's actually, I'm going to switch over to my Mac just because it's easier. Um, in the browser here, you can do files and folders. Keep in mind, you want to do this lightly, right? So, if you have a situation where your whole team is relying on one OneDrive folder that you or somebody else on your team hosts, you really want to move that to Teams, because if I win the lottery and leave the institution for whatever reason, these files aren't necessarily going to stick around, even if they're shared with you, right? There's ways around that. You can transfer the files. I don't want to incite panic in that regard, so don't worry about that necessarily. But Teams makes that not even a problem in general, right? So you can have files that live beyond the owner in that case. However, for light sharing, I would go into a folder or a file, doesn't matter. Right click and hit the share button. Actually, let me just do this one. Um, right click, hit the share button. And there's a number of different areas of sharing that are possible, right? So people you choose, I highly recommend, right? So you specifically pick people that need access. These other ones, well, this one actually is kind of just people you already have access to, right? So if you're just grabbing a link, I want to send it to my manager, for instance, you can utilize only people with existing access. But to actually share, people you choose, you pick, what do you want them to be able to do with that file? I'll just leave it as view. You could set an expiration date if you like. And when I hit apply, it's just going to give me a box where I can pick people, right? So I can pick this person and pick Kelvin, and I'll say, this is a test. Please ignore. And I just hit send. Now, keep in mind, this sharing aspect is specifically for a limited use case, right? So again, if you really wanted to work on this long term, I would suggest Teams, but that's a great way to just give people, access for a draft we're working on or a limited use case type couple files type thing. Totally reasonable. Caveat to that is be careful with your pictures, your desktop, and your documents because that is your sync tool is syncing things to there, right? So you probably don't want to share those files. You can theoretically. I wouldn't. So be careful with those ones. Um, how long can a file be recovered in OneDrive? Yes. So Raf had a good point there. Recycle bin is your friend. So go in here to see anything you deleted recently. This will be 30 days. Administrators have a little bit of a bigger window, but not much. So if you don't see it in here, you can reach out, but use this as your layer of defense, right? If you right click on any of these, you can delete it permanently if you want to. You can restore it and it'll put it back to that original location, or you can gather some more details on the right-hand side here if any exist, specifically on folders, probably not, but files might give you some more details. Okay. We're using the SharePoint via Teams as a server for a group. Is there an easy way to search all the files per person to see what has been shared with that person? Great question. There's a couple of different avenues for that, so I'd need to see your use case exactly. Maybe reach out to me directly on that. But search is really fairly good in OneDrive, I think, right? So if the search bar at the top, you can click all files, my files, or the whole organization for things that are shared with you at large. And once you search for something here like Tech Tuesday, you can refine your search a little bit more at the top by dates or by type of file. And you can see the type of file gets somewhat extensive, right? But you can also look at browse files by people, which I would recommend this. You could see all of the files that were shared with me with specific or by specific people. This view, I think, would be helpful for what you're asking. So I could search for my manager's at the top, but I'll just search for him to show what it looks like, and I can see all of the files that he shared with me go into here and still do the whole folder Word, whatever um, search that I want. Um, that I think would be your best bet for that question. That's a great question. Is there an efficient way recommended by ITS for migration box to OneDrive, especially when it's files flows? Okay, that's a good question too. So if you do have a Google Drive or Box in this case platform that you want to move over to OneDrive, it's not like we have a specific tool to do that necessarily, but in my experience, what I've seen the best way to handle that is go to your third party, Box in this case, or Google Drive, whatever the case may be, and download those files that are active and move them over to OneDrive piece by piece. It is a little bit time consuming to do that, but the best way to do that, or the best the reason I think that's best is you can slowly move files over there and organize as you go, right? So the analogy I like to give is when you move a house, you don't, take the stuff you don't want anymore, right? You throw the stuff away. So since you have a platform that you're using actively and it's kind of your day to day, I would take some files either. There's two ways to think about it. Move everybody to OneDrive and move your active files over there first, or move your historical files over there first and create a file folder structure that makes sense in OneDrive slash SharePoint. And for that case, I would definitely recommend SharePoint or Teams. And make that folder structure that you like first, delete the stuff you don't care about anymore, and moving that stuff over there one by one is the best way to go. Um, for that specifically, I don't think it would be a OneDrive migration. I think it would be a Teams or a SharePoint migration. And feel free to reach out to me directly if you want more information on that. I've done a couple of those since I've been here, and obviously bunch of them historically. So we'll definitely be able to chat and give you the best foot forward on that one. Good question. Any other questions you guys have? We have about 8 minutes left. These are really good questions, so I'm glad I left time. I see Michaela. Yes, sharing permissions. Yeah, so that is a very good call out. When you move stuff over like that, obviously keep in mind the permissions won't move because you're basically downloading it and re-uploading it. So again, for Joseph's question, definitely reach out to me if you have any specific questions on that one directly. Carlos, is there a limit on how many files I can download? The only limit is the hard drive space that you have, right? So when you do the sync, by default, everything will be the cloud icon. So it's just a link, and the file or the hard drive storage on that is minuscule, right? It's just a link to each one of those files, right? So just doing the sync itself, you can have as many files as you want. However, if you start downloading those files to keep them always on your device, just be careful when you do that, that you have the hard drive space to accommodate that. Great question. Um, while we're waiting for a couple other questions, one of the fun things that I wanted to call out on this platform that I like is the favorites section right here. So I favorited a couple of them here. If you have files that you touch a lot, the favorite section is kind of handy. I don't like having like a favorites here, if you will, because I like to have my files where they should logically go in my organizational structure, right? But favoriting files is nice to kind of have a separate location to see the files you're actively working with, and you can favorite or unfavorite at a quick button right here, right? So I love using the favorite section to keep a working list of things you're working on. Keep that in mind. At the bottom here, you'll also notice there's quick access for teams that you're a member of or SharePoint sites that you're a member of. Um, this is on purpose by Microsoft, right? So if you do have a folder here that you start to see is becoming more of a larger thing than it initially was planned out for, moving things from OneDrive to a team or to SharePoint is very simple. You don't have to do the whole thing of downloading it and re-uploading it. You can move directly from OneDrive to Teams, right? So once something grows to a point where you think it needs to be migrated to Teams, don't let that be a barrier. It's super easy to move that over to one of these other locations, and you can interact with them in the same way. You can still sync. You could link them into your OneDrive if you want, or you can sync a whole separate location. I think it's super handy to have that here as well. To organize Office's SharePoint files, can download them into OneDrive, make changes, organize them. So you could do that, although again, you might want to watch that presentation at the beginning because I talked about the sync tool and how you can work with OneDrive or Teams files, right? So just real quickly, since we have the time here, in Teams, if I go to a team and I open up like just any of them, for instance, I'm not going to actually do it, but I'll show you what it looks like. You go to the specific channel and the specific file section you want, and there's a sync button up here, right? So this is spoiler alert for the other presentation that I gave, but these are the two buttons you'll want to interact with. Sync does exactly what we did in this presentation, right? So it will open it up in a separate location here in OneDrive, and you'll be able to see all the files just like this. It'll just be a separate OneDrive that says, looks like a little building, right? So that's the sync tool. I prefer sync over shortcut, just FYI. So I would do that. Once you do that, you can interact with these files just like you would any other platform, right? So if I wanted to drag and drop this into a different folder, it'll actually make that change in this environment as well. Keep in mind when you're doing that, it's going to be a little bit disruptive to your individuals that are also in that location. So giving them a heads up is probably preferred, right? Saying, hey, I'm going to be making these changes. You might want to watch out for today because these files are going to be moving all over the place. But that would be what I would do in that case. If you don't like sync, which some people don't, it's a preference thing, right? I like to have it separate. You can do add shortcut to OneDrive, and that's that link icon that we talked about in the presentation today. That will actually just link this whole folder, which is empty. I obviously picked an empty one because that's my luck, but it'll pick all of those files up and put a shortcut into your own OneDrive. When you click on that, it'll open up that folder in your OneDrive that is all of these files, and you could do the same thing. So rather than having to download them all like you would have to do for like a Google Drive box, Dropbox migration, in the Microsoft space, you don't have to do that. You could do it all in the cloud to save you that downloading and uploading. Great question. Ron, any advice for work? Is it very easy to have two? Yes. Great question. So Ron, that question's great. I'm going to read it as is. Any advice on your workflow style for your personal life versus your work life? Is it very easy to have two lives mesh as your work between devices? As you mentioned, God forbid, you get let go or something similar. When people get let go, if they're not careful with their personal files? Yes, this is a great question. Um, Unsurprising to the people on the call that know me, I do have a personal Microsoft life and a professional Microsoft life, and I'm in and out of it every day, right? So my family uses Teams to communicate. I also use Teams to communicate with people here at work. It is very obvious the difference between the two. So Microsoft actually did a really good job of branding the two environments to make it very obvious what you're doing. I would say if somebody puts work files in their personal OneDrive, they're doing it intentionally, not necessarily accidentally in most cases, because it is very clear at the top. It says if it's work or school or personal, and it, you know, different color coding, things like that. Even in the app, it's a little bit UI different between teams, work and school and teams personal. So it is very clear, I think, um, where you're putting things. Um, that's a great question in that regard. I do that today, and I haven't had like a whoopsie situation yet. Where that kind of breaks down slightly, and I can't touch on this a bunch, is if you're using a personal device, right? So your personal device, you might be syncing your desktop documents and pictures personally, right? And if you're using like a BYOD situation, um, you want to be careful that you're not storing it to your personal desktop documents and pictures, right? But that's a workflow thing that people need to understand, and also a good reason to have shared files that aren't just your own in Teams rather than in OneDrive, because you can link it there, but ultimately it lives within the institution boundaries. That's a great question. Yeah, so Casey, I agree with you. Adding shortcut to OneDrive, I don't like it as much. I find it to be a little bit more buggy than the sync tool, especially like you mentioned for things that are highly collaborative, because it is just a link at the end of the day. I highly recommend Sync. If I created the tool instead of just supporting it, I would remove Add Shortcut to OneDrive. But some people like that workflow, and it works for some people. I find for files that especially are highly collaborative, like you mentioned, syncing is much better than Add Shortcut. And even technical reasons like that aside, I just like the fact that it's totally logically separate, right? So I don't know if I have one. I just tried to clean it up for this presentation, so I might not have one yet. But I like that it's a separate folder here at the top, right? I have my own stuff and then I have the shared stuff separately. And I just like that separation of boundaries a little bit better. So I know that all my stuff is here and all my shared stuff is in a different folder. So yeah, Josh's opinion, I would definitely recommend Sync over Add Shortcut to OneDrive for sure. And with that, I think we're at time, so I'll turn it back over to Vanessa. If anybody has any extra questions, though, before I turn it over, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information will be with the follow-up information. If you want to have one-on-one conversations about how to do a migration, or meet with your team, I'm more than happy to do that. Jump into a stand-up that you guys have or something like that, and just have some conversations about what migration platform or methodology works best for you. No two people are different. No two people are the same. No two teams are the same. So if you would like to have that conversation, I'm more than open to it. You can just grab some time on my calendar. I'll turn it back over to you, Vanessa.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. And thanks to all of you for posting such great questions. Again, for anybody who signed in late, I will be sending a follow-up email with this recording, as well as some of the links that Josh mentioned, such as the previous Tech Tuesday session we did, differentiating between SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reply to that email. I'm going to include Josh's info as well as Raphael so that we can hopefully answer any questions you might have or issues you might be experiencing. So you just have a better experience overall with OneDrive. With that, I wish you a great rest of your afternoon and hope to see you next week for another session. We're actually having Josh again talking about Power Automate. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for the registration that we'll send out later this week. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Josh. Thanks, Raphael.
Thanks.